Cabinet has cleared the 7th Pay Commission's recommendations. We'll have more details on that in a short while from now. But it appears that it probably, if it has cleared it, it would have cleared it with the additional 15 to 20% hike which was recommended over and above the initial recommendations of the 7th Pay Commission. And this it's likely to cost about 1 lakh crore in terms of for the cabinet, the government. Some of it has already been, of course, put in by the government in the budget itself. The rest is likely to be paid from the railway budget. Saugata Bhattacharya, Senior Vice President, Business and Economic Research at Axis Bank, joins us on the phone line. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Bhattacharya. This is Anindya from the Delhi studio. 1 lakh crore in expenditure, and I was trying to work it out in terms of what it is for our current estimated GDP. That's about, I would say, 0.6% of GDP. So, and a significant multiplier effect. What impact does that have on demand in the economy?
Well, I mean, it definitely would, because, I mean, a big ticket expenditure increase like this would definitely put in some money in consumer durables, probably a little bit into the real estate segment. So I think from those sectors, and particularly from the consumer FMCG segment. So all of these segments are the immediate beneficiaries, whether it be electronic items, household goods, etc., white goods. So that's the immediate impact. Obviously, I mean, the second round impact is the impact on inflation. Yeah. That how much might consumer expenditure and rising discretionary incomes fuel CPI inflation and specifically the house rent component, the house rent allowance, the fairly large increase in house rent allowances. How much might that impact inflation? So I think there are pluses and minuses in an environment where demand is poor. This does give some stimulus, but I think this needs to be calibrated well so that unlike the last time, and obviously, I mean, this will not be as large, the areas will not be as large as happened in 2008, 2009. So that will still keep things relatively more in check. But I mean, let's see, I mean, what the actual contours are of the package that's been approved.
Mr. Bhattacharya, if I look at something like house rent, of course, the pay commission largely affects government employees, and then there are these other impact that you have on those who are allied to government but are not directly paid by government. Let's say something like university teachers who have their own pay commission, but that will be in the later stages. House rent there is partly going to come back to the government, right? Because it's a lot of them get government housing and there's a deduction from their house rent allowances.
Right, absolutely. I mean, some part of this is notional. Yeah. So the worry is, I mean, but I mean, it's not. I mean, in places like Delhi, there is some amount of housing that is given by the government. But we had looked at the National Sample Survey numbers on the ownership of houses, and it does look like it's the actual housing that is provided by the government is a relatively small portion of the total the number of government employees and servants. So I think so the effect of the spillover of the house rent allowances that are actually paid out to some of these employees onto the broader market, so the private sector employees and so on. I mean, even keeping aside all the other the public sector employee ecosystem. So just from the government servants directly into the broader privately owned private rentals that we see, that was the key source of worry. That how would the rental market...
Mr. Bhattacharya, if I look at what is happening in Delhi right now, in the place that I stay, rentals have halved, and this is a slightly, perhaps a little more high rental area, but rentals have halved. I am looking at inventory available. There are 1,000 units in a small area of inventory available at the moment, and this is not just the picture for the single place that I stay. Across the board, inventory availability is massive, whether it is in NCR area or specific areas within Delhi. So, you know, there is one thing called the immediate impact of money flowing into and leading to price rise. The other is inventory availability tends to absorb that without any rise in prices.
Right. So, but I mean, there would be the inventory availability. The only problem is I speak of Mumbai. I'm not very sure on the ecosystem in the NCR area.
Yeah.
The inventory available is completely on the higher side, and that's the essential problem. That the salaries and HRAs that will be paid out here would not be able to fill that gap in the high-priced inventory, and that's the current problem in mostly in real estate.
But if I look at things that are likely to be, the bulk areas that come into the hands of government servants tend to go into that car that I was going to replace, or let's say the fridge has not been working for some time. Let's wait for the arrears to come. We'll buy a new fridge, maybe a higher-end fridge. Let me go to an LED from an LCD TV. Those things are going to get a fillip.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's what we said, that household white goods, electronic purchases, and even the FMCG. I mean, even FMCG, moving up to upgrading into a more premium segment and things, all of that are inevitable consequences of this things. And so even in that segment, demand was not particularly strong. So that probably is the first area of a consumption-led push that you are likely to see from the payouts.
So I understand that your concern about inflation obviously would have to do with interest rates as well. Now, if inflation goes up, what happens to all those who were baying for Mr. Rajan's blood, saying that he's not been reducing interest rates?
No, I mean, so that is a perpetual problem. That how much might the RBI be able to cut rates? You remember, I mean, each of the policy con calls, the RBI has painstakingly announced that it will tend to look through the what they see as a transient increase in rental-led inflation, other commodity-led inflation. So, I mean, they estimate that the effects might be about 40 to 60 basis points on the CPI inflation, but they would look through that. But exactly the worry, the risk in all of this is not just the central government, and there are a whole host of state governments and in the broader ecosystem of the public service employees. So each one of them will have a follow-through on the Central Pay Commission. So this is unlikely to be a one-time process. I mean, for the next 2, 3, 4 years, this process is likely to play through. And I'm wondering that if actually inflation begins to increase and there is a lot of excess supply, excess capacity, as you have pointed out, in the space of many of these electronic companies as well. So that should be able to absorb a little bit of the price increases that we see as a risk. But generally, I mean, you tend to expect prima facie that there will be an increase in inflation.
Well, sometimes one feels that that's really not that much of a problem in this situation where there's overcapacity, there's demand constraint. Inflation goes up, and if that can be a stimulus for people to use up capacity, and there is a demand created through government spending, that would be something that people have been talking about for some time.
Yes, I agree with you. I 100% agree with you that probably in this environment, the net benefits of this package are positive. So, I mean, despite chances, risks of somewhat higher inflation, mopping up this excess capacity, which has been a huge problem in capex in these industries, might actually be beneficial. I'm just a little bit worried about the follow-through. You remember the last time round, the situation was actually much worse last time in 2008-9. There was a serious underestimation of the demand stimulative effects of the pay commission. It is not likely to be as high this time around, but there's still that risk, problem is that the RBI would tend to be a bit cautious in its accommodative stance in this fiscal stimulative environment.
Right. Saugata, do you think that it's just a cabinet which is approving this? Everything of this was already known, and that's why it would really not change any estimates? What was known yesterday is still known today?
Pretty much. I mean, this is a matter of essentially decimals rounding off. The question that now remains is when would this package be effective? Would it be 1st January, 1st April? How much is the total HRA component? What would be the details of the pension package, etc.? So those are the issues that now need to be resolved in this. The broad contours were always known. The budget had factored in some part of this, had budgeted for about, if I remember, 55,000 crores for the stimulative, just the central budget, not the railways. so as a part of this. So that part has already factored into the calculations. Now the details are awaited.
Right, Saugata, thank you so much for taking out time for us. Hope to see you again once we have the details.